Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Captain's Table radio show and podcast. The show is a play on words of our creator and producer Tom Captain's name, but it also harkens back to the 1800s when passengers on English ships would gather for dinner, and the captain would join his most notable guest at an elevated table, and the other guests would listen to their interesting conversations. I'm your host, Paul Koretz. I'm a former city councilman in both the cities of West Hollywood and Los Angeles, and a former member of the state assembly. And my guest today is Eli Lipmen, executive director of Move LA, an organization that focuses on improved transit systems in LA County, but also on other critical issues we face. They're especially focused on Prop 5 on this November ballot. Welcome, Eli.
Hello. Good to see you, Paul. You are my former council member when I used to live in Council District 5. So we've done a couple things together, including
Yes,
parks and
indeed.
art and a very cool renaming of the library right in Cheviot Hills for one of our very famous councilwomen, Roz Wyman, who brought the Dodgers to Los Angeles. Now the world champion World Series Dodgers, correct?
Yes, she was a good friend, and I will be forever grateful for her having done that.
Be proud that we've done eight World Series now. It's amazing, exciting.
Yes, indeed. I went to game one in 1981, was it? No, 1988,
Yeah,
and game
wow,
one in this year, both of which were remarkable saves of games that we looked like we were going to lose.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, I'm looking forward to the parade tomorrow and given the given the team their due because I know the GM was the coach was hoping to get his parade in 2020 and he didn't get that. So it'll
Well,
be
we
good to
all got it
see
this year, which is
his
exciting.
parade.
Now
Yeah.
you were a member of the neighborhood council in Palms. What was that like?
I mean, not only was I a member of the neighborhood council, I was the treasurer and then the president elected in I guess 2010, and then I also became president and was appointed by the city council with you to president of the neighborhood council commission. I found neighborhood councils a really great way to kind of get involved with local government, identify other people in the community who are passionate about the same things, and be able to move forward a community project. I mean, and I know we worked with your office to not only create this model for putting public art on utility boxes, which became something that not only was allowable throughout the city and I've been popping up in communities all over the city, and I felt really proud on that. But we were able to like imagine an entire park, a small park, but reimagine the park and kind of bring that to fruition when you were at the council office with the park and rec, it gave me a real understanding of like how to work with the bureaucracy, how to work with elected officials, how to bring community members together. And it was a lot of fun. It had a lot of challenges for sure. Not everybody agreed, and I would have folks who would just sort of disagree with me simply because of what I said or that I said it. But now, but I do feel in general that I had a very positive experience, and I see some really incredible things happening with neighborhood councils around the region. So I'm still a fan, but I know that some of them are more challenging than others.
Yes, that's true. And even your own Palms neighborhood council, you were definitely one of the very best presidents of that group. But we've had
I
some
appreciate that.
rocky
Thank you.
days.
Yeah, I mean, look, when I was on the neighborhood council commission, we oversaw 99 neighborhood councils. We had at any one point three that were, or a third of them that were doing fantastic stuff, a third of them that were just kind of getting along, and a third of them that were on the verge of collapse, and that could change at any one moment. And so, our role was really just to kind of lift all boats and improve Los Angeles as a whole. So it was a big job, but somebody had to do it. And when Mayor Garcetti asked me to do it, I obliged.
Well, I'm glad you did. Now,
Thank
Tell
you.
us a little bit more about Move LA, your organization, and its mission and goals and how you became executive director.
Yeah, sure. Move LA has been around for 16 years. It was founded by the former mayor of Santa Monica, the great Denny Zane, who is still on our staff today, our policy director and founder. As the lore goes, he was stuck on Pico Boulevard going east in the afternoon and heard a story on NPR, probably KCRW, saying that Metro had this long range transportation plan with all these projects, but no money to fund it. And he knew that that was going to be a big problem, being stuck in traffic and knowing that there would be more traffic to come. And so he brought together groups from business, labor, environmental organizations to come up with a plan for high quality transportation. And through a conference that we held in 2008, early 2008, with such great colleagues as Mike Fewer, you probably remember,
Oh
and
yeah,
others, we were
my
able to move.
predecessor on the council.
Yeah, and Zev Yaroslavsky, you've probably heard of him too, came up with a plan that included legislation in the state, which I think actually you may have played a role on in 2008, that allowed Metro to go to the ballot to ask voters to approve a half-cent sales tax for Measure R. That was the first sales tax in decades that supported public transportation purposes, and that not only funded capital projects, but operations and maintenance. And so we said, hey, we got something here. So Move LA continued to work to expand and build upon that coalition to pass Measure M in 2016 that not only extended Measure R indefinitely, but added a half-cent sales tax. And now that's $120 billion over 40 years, the largest public infrastructure project in the United States at the time for our public transit system. So we did those big ballot measures, and we continue to do the implementation on that. We have now expanded our work. We're now doing a lot of affordable housing work. So one of the projects that we did in 2022 that we got started, and actually you would love this, Paul, because I know you're an old labor guy. We said, and a tenants' rights guy. We sat down and thought, well, the elections in the city of LA are going to change in 2022. Remember, we went from off cycle to on cycle, and we're going to have a different electorate. How do we bring tenants' rights groups together with labor groups? And so we sat them down and said, let's build a coalition. And out of that came Measure ULA, which we passed in 2022 with 58% of voter support. And that was unique because it was a citizens initiative. We collected over 100,000 signatures on that. I was one of the people on that campaign, as well as the Measure M campaign.
Does ULA do? I don't know that everyone
Ah,
will remember that.
yes, so Measure ULA is a tax on properties sold. So only the sale of a property, the transfer of a property over $5 million, it imposes tax on that of 4.5% tax. And then if the property is over $10 million or $10.2 million now, 5.5% tax. And that has been a success. Honestly, it's generated close to $500 million already since we started collecting in April of 2023, the funding. So close to $500 million. And that money is going to tenant protection. So it goes for legal services to keep people housed, education programs, and to acquire, rehab, and construct affordable housing in the city of Los Angeles, as well as emergency assistance, particularly for seniors who are most vulnerable and other people who are very vulnerable, so that they can stay housed. And I think it's really driven our ability to produce more housing, but also keep as many people housed, which is the least expensive way to address our homelessness challenges.
And how effective do you think it's been so far? What have you followed the spending and what it's accomplished?
Yeah, I think it's actually been really effective. I'm just yeah, for us, we've been following it very closely. Part of Measure ULA that was unique was setting up the Citizens Oversight Committee, which was meant to oversee how the dollars are spent and includes folks who have been formerly homeless, tenants advocates, affordable housing developers, labor folks, and others. And they've put together a set of program guidelines that are actually sitting right now waiting for the Housing and Homelessness Committee to approve them. Once there's been some interim guidelines, and that's actually been very helpful For instance, it's actually, we just came out with the numbers from the COC. More than 52,000 people have been served by Measure ULA, meaning through legal assistance, both directly or indirectly, education programs, housing. We've had over 10,000 union jobs created through Measure ULA, over 800 units produced, and then thousands of people have received these checks to ensure that they can stay housed. So we think it's been very effective. I'll give one example. There was a project in, I think, Rampart Village, right above a transit station, the Red Line station, that is a project being built by the Little Tokyo Service Center. And they were running into a big challenge, which a lot of housing projects are right now. Insurance costs have gone through the roof, like quadrupled in just a year. And so they had a real challenge, and ULA dollars were able to come and help get them over that challenge so that they can continue to produce affordable housing, which is exactly what we need right now.
Oh, that's really amazing. So I personally am glad that passed. There was a lot of opposition. People were
Still is.
fearful that it would impact real estate sales, but honestly, 4 or 5% of sale in which someone could make millions of dollars is really a modest fraction when you consider how important it is to solve homelessness in Los Angeles.
That was our thinking, and we've been looking at the numbers, and I said, it's generated close to $500 million already, so it has mean that there's been sales. The biggest impact that we've kind of seen on the market in terms of properties has really been that interest rate, which has nothing to do with us. It has everything to do with the Fed and interest rates right now, and that's had a bigger impact on that. But this is an ongoing project. We will always need affordable housing. We will always need emergency assistance for folks who may lose a job, have an accident, have a major medical issue, and just need a couple $100s, literally sometimes, to be able to pay the rent for those couple of months, to be able to get through that crisis. And if we can keep those people housed, that's the only way we're going to solve the homelessness challenge in Los Angeles.
Well, we're going to have to take a break for a word from our sponsors. We will be right back with the Captain's Table.
Over 11 million Americans are paying more than half of their income in rent. As president, I will take on the high costs that matter most to most Americans. Food, clothes, rent. We will take on corporate landlords and cap unfair rent increases.
The age of affordable housing starts now. Vote yes on rent control. Vote yes on Prop 33.
Prop 33 is endorsed by the California Democratic Party. Appearance of Harris did not mean she endorsed the measure. Ad paid for by renters and homeowners for rent control. Yes on 33, sponsored by AIDS Healthcare Foundation. Ad committee's top funders, AIDS Healthcare Foundation and Unite Here Local 11.
We're back after a break with the Captain's Table. And I'm Paul Koretz, former council member and assemblyman. And we have our guest, Eli Lipmen from Move LA. Eli, how did Move LA become one of the leading organizations in support of Prop 5? And can you tell us exactly what Prop 5 does?
Yeah, for sure. So we were approached and been working with organizations statewide, actually, to address this in the state constitution. For the government, for a city or a county or another municipality to issue a bond, which is essentially debt or a loan to do a big infrastructure project, they have to come to you and I. Hey, Paul. Hey, Eli. We need your support for this. And that requires a 2/3 vote of the electorate in that city or county. And that has caused some challenges. We saw that just here in the city of LA, for instance, with the parks bond a couple of years ago in 2022, where it went down to defeat, even though, people support parks, but they had some issues with the accountability on that measure. And so Prop 5 actually solves challenges like that. It gives local voters an enhanced power to address things like affordable housing and public infrastructure, water, sewage, fire and emergency needs, as well as public transportation, where current law just really doesn't allow you to do that. So one, it's going to mean a 55% vote rather than that 2/3 vote. Still a majority, a super majority, but a little bit of a lower threshold. It's going to require that those priorities are what matters to that local voter and that taxpayer. by requiring accountability and oversight, meaning the municipality is going to have to say, well, instead of, oh, we're just going to use it for parks generally. No, it has to list out what those projects are going to be. And that's really important. And then it requires also accountability with citizens' oversight. And then, the third thing that I think, again, I really want to put out there is that this is about building more good stuff and ensuring that that's done by good paying union jobs. So not just affordable housing and building support for that for seniors, working families, veterans, and first-time homebuyers, but also people with disabilities and people who are homeless, as well as first-time homebuyer programs. But it also means that the city of Sierra Madre, who's going to need more fire safety and emergency response systems, can put a bond on the ballot that really addresses that need, while the city of Inglewood, who might need more affordable housing or might need more transit infrastructure, can put that on the ballot in their city and ask voters for its support. So really, it gives flexibility, accountability, oversight for voters, and that's why we've been helping to support it.
And what people may not be aware of is there have been measures that have done really well, and they've still lost because of the law as it's structured. So
yeah,
you could have something that's desperately needed, and 65% of the voters agree, which is a huge majority, and yet it's not enough to pass under the current rules. So this makes it a little more practical. There's no reason why an initiative that passes by 60% for infrastructure or affordable housing can't be implemented when people know some of these things are very important, and yet our voters are so polarized they almost couldn't agree on where to go for lunch, much less on an issue. And yet, where there is a consensus, it still hasn't been quite enough to pass.
It means a minority, like 34% of people can say, you know what, we don't need this water or wastewater project. Or, I know that you, Paul, are passionate about climate adaptation and resiliency, as well as clean air and zero emission vehicles, right? These are things that we know that we need. We need more chargers. We need more ways to reduce pollution in our air. And these things are all going to cost money. They're going to create a lot of great jobs in the process, but we can't have 34% of the electorate saying, no, we can't pay for those things. And I think that's what Prop 5 changes. And it's still, again, 55% is no walk in the park. You still have to convince more than a majority of people to say yes, which I think is prudent, but it does make it a little bit, easier for folks to be able, in cities, elected officials, to be able to say, hey, this is a real need that we have in our city. We need to go to voters and ask for their support. And that's the other thing too that I think people need to recognize. A vote yes on Prop 5 does not mean that immediately there's going to be, that's going to change. It still is going to require a city or a county or another municipality to say, yeah, we have these projects we want to do, and ask you for your vote for that.
How do you get something like this passed? I mean, it's a low-key issue. It's not a sexy issue. It's a bit of a hard one for people to understand. How are you getting the word out to people about the importance of this measure?
For us, it's been talking with sort of the folks that you tend to work with, organized groups, right? Everything from your local community group to a church group to a Democratic Party group to a nonprofit, right? We've been talking with a lot of organizations in the environmental space who actually, this was really interesting. This proposition, this idea came out of Sacramento through successive years in the legislature. It was really driven by folks in the affordable housing community who said, we need more public dollars out there to build more affordable housing. But really, this is a real benefit for those in the environmental and the water space and the climate space as well. And so we've been doing a lot of conversations with them to say, yeah, like those projects. And actually, for those who are thinking of voting yes, and many are, because the polling looks really great on Proposition 4, that's the climate bond. You may have spoken with somebody before about that. And that is a $10 billion bond. Why $10 billion? It's because there were actually more than $20 billion in projects that could have been put in that bond, but through negotiations in Sacramento and through what the governor wanted to see, that became a $10 billion bond. Prop 5 actually marries really well with Prop 4 in the sense that if it also passes, it means that your community Culver City, West Hollywood, Los Angeles, or wherever you're listening can do the project for climate resilience, climate adaptation that they need to do in that local environment and actually be able to uplift the work of Prop 4. So they actually can work really well together with a state and a local source of funding. And that's exactly what Prop 5 is about.
And we've got important issues like local water supply. I mean, our water that we get from distant places, Colorado River from up in Northern California, it looks like over time, because of climate changes, that'll be reduced. And we have to implement projects that will be somewhat expensive to clean up our local water. I mean, we have water in the San Fernando Valley that was polluted many years ago, and that'll be expensive to clean up, but it has to be cleaned up and we have to be able to access it. We have water that we just pass billions of gallons of wastewater into the ocean, which we could instead treat and use for other purposes. And we'll have to do that. Otherwise, LA 50 years from now will be a desert. But it's not going to be cheap. And something like Prop 5 makes it possible for us to
100%.
prioritize those kinds of projects.
Even more, I think, closer to people's hearts. We just heard a week ago that one of the refineries here in Southern California is going to close down next year. That's going to mean less supply of gas. So we have two kind of options there that the LA Times pointed out. One is, well, we got to import more oil from a foreign country, which is both not good for our security, but also not good for the environment. Or we really need to accelerate the number of electric vehicles. Well, what's that going to take? It's actually going to take more infrastructure, because the biggest reason people are not transitioning quicker to electric vehicles is that range issue and where am I going to charge? And so with Prop 5, we can be able to accelerate EV charging opportunities so that consumers will buy more EVs. And we can accelerate the transportation needs that we have, right? More rapid bus lanes, more public transit service, more first last mile options. So people say, you know what? I don't even need this car. I'm going to ditch it and I'm just going to take transit. And it will accelerate more affordable housing closer to places that people work, have doctor's appointments, etc. So that not only is it more affordable to live closer to where the places are that you need to be, like your job, but you have really good public transportation that's going to take you there. And if that doesn't work, then you're going to have both the ability to get an electric car, but the charging infrastructure to be able to ensure that you can get where you need to go. And so there's plenty of benefits there.
And I could say I've taken a few trips in the last year and found that charging stations have popped up, and there's less danger of running out of charge and not finding a good opportunity. So we're moving in the right direction. We just need to do more to get there.
100%.
So
we've been as an organization. So some of the other work that we do, just so you're aware, we work, been on for many years, for 8 years, the South LA Promise Zone in South LA. And one of the projects we've been working on is how do we bring more charging stations to South and South Central Los Angeles so that everybody has an equitable opportunity to get an electric vehicle or an electric bike. That's one of the other projects we do, Universal Basic Mobility and an e-bike incentive program. So plenty of opportunities, and we need to make sure that they're done equitably.
And I know that's been a priority for LA City Council, has been making sure there are EV charging stations in areas that are more sort of charging station deserts, so that everybody can access them as they're more affordable.
I was just in a park last week for a Halloween party in one of the LA City parks, and we were demonstrating electric charging because they had just this is very cool. It's solar powered, so you have this big solar panel. It's not connected to any infrastructure. You just pull your car in, plug it in like you normally would, and you just get charged from the sun. It's really, really cool. It doesn't take you putting in utilities, and it's 100% clean.
Yeah, we had a pilot of that in Rancho Park or Cheviot Hills Park, whichever you want to call it, a few years ago. So that technology has been around for a short time, and it's interesting. It's a good way to at least provide some of that in the short term until we actually build the charging stations into our infrastructure.
100%. 100%. And they're easily deployable. For instance, too, like if you have like a big event, right? Like a festival or a Dodgers parade tomorrow, you can deploy a bunch of those temporarily in a spot where they might be needed, which could be really critical and powerful and important for those temporary needs so that somebody can say, well, turns out that I can take my EV to this event that I didn't think I could because there were no, fixed charging stations. So I think it's really exciting.
I agree. Now, let's take another break for a word from our sponsors.
Ready to make your brand stand out? At Amplify AI Media, we combine the power of artificial intelligence with creative expertise to elevate your marketing strategy. Our AI-driven approach ensures that every decision is data-backed, every campaign is targeted, and every result is impactful. We amplify your brand's voice louder and clearer than ever before. Amplify AI Media, where innovation meets precision. Visit amplifymedia.ai. Why settle for ordinary when extraordinary is within reach?
Well, we're back at the captain's table with our guest Eli Lipmen from Move LA. Eli, why does Move LA focus so much on passing initiatives?
That's a great question. We realized that particularly here in Los Angeles, where we have big needs, I think Manuel Pastor said this once, that I love Los Angeles, but it has all of the world's problems in it. So we have really big needs. We have high levels of poverty, high levels of food insecurity, big needs on housing and transportation. And we can only rely on the federal and state government for certain things, but they can also be very unreliable. A government changes like we have in a couple of days with the election, and who knows if we will have the funding we need to address the big challenges that we face. And so, you can also rely on local government as well. But as we know with the city of Los Angeles right now, for instance, they're in a huge budget deficit. And so we've found that the only way to do the quote big stuff, which is what we are into, you have to go to the voters directly and say, here's the plan. This is what we think we need to do. Make the case and get their support. And through that process, both the initiative, the citizens process, which is where we as advocates actually write the measure itself. We go out on the street, we get people to sign those petitions at your grocery store or in your local park. Probably been hounded by folks before. And then we actually go and pass that measure, or we work with a government body, Metro or the city or the county, to put something on the ballot. And those have different pluses and minuses, but we've found that the only way to really do big stuff and raise big dollars is to go to the voters and ask that for them to support what we believe are worthy causes: public transportation, affordable housing, clean air, and do that by voting and in some cases opening up their pocketbooks.
Well, it seems like a good strategy, and it seems like one that's worked well so far.
We've been very successful. We've been successful on 5 ballot measures so far, and hopefully we will make that add to that list on election day by passing yes on Prop 5 and yes on Measure A.
Well, and as we're discussing that, why don't you tell us a little bit about Measure A, which I don't believe is directly transit related, but if you could tell us a little bit more about Measure A and why Move LA is so strongly in support.
So Measure A is a citizens initiative that we helped to qualify. We collected 400,000 plus signatures from citizens across LA County to get qualified. It's the Affordable Housing, Homeless Solutions, and Prevention Now measure. And, it has 3 big buckets for where we believe it's going to help. It's going to mean more homes that are affordable. So it dedicates a third of that funding to increasing the housing supply of affordable, safe, and quality homes. It includes money for more mental health care, so addiction treatment, other critical services for those people who are in crisis right now, and we see them on the street and we need to be helping them. And then we're just going to ensure more accountability over the homelessness programs with strict independent oversight and audits. We worked on Measure H, which was a 10-year measure for homeless services. And we really learned from that in that it wasn't going to just take addressing people who are already in crisis on the street. we really needed to make sure that we address the affordable housing crisis and challenge as well. And not just in one city, but all 88 cities and in unincorporated LA County. So this is a countywide ballot measure that will ensure that there is not only funding throughout the county, but accountability throughout the county to build more affordable housing. And yeah, it is related to public transit. We were looking at this trend where we were losing low income residents of LA County over the last 15 years. People earning less than $100,000 a year were leaving the county, going to a different county or leaving the state of California, while higher income residents were coming in, over people who were earning over $100,000 a year. And what was the result? Well, you saw that in your district, Paul. All of a sudden, Venice became unaffordable, Mar Vista became unaffordable, Palms became unaffordable, right? And it just kept moving as we saw more of these high income households move in. And that meant that the very people who are riding the public transportation system were leaving the region. So that's why we've been really focused on how do we build more affordable housing near public transportation? And we have a lot of incentives to do that because that's going to drive additional ridership for the investments we've already made in public transportation.
Well, and I think that's something that I'm not sure everyone is as aware and focused on because there's a big push to build luxury housing near transit. And I think that really kind of misses the mark because studies have shown the people of lower incomes, often who can't afford a vehicle, are the ones that take public transit. So by evicting some lower income tenants to build more units, but luxury units, you're really missing the opportunity. If you build affordable units near transit, you're creating a huge number of additional transit riders and making it convenient for them.
100%. And, I know we worked on this. It doesn't have to be that that tall, right? We're talking 3, 4, 5 stories at most. It doesn't have to be huge amounts of density, and it can be concentrated on commercial boulevards, which also happen to be where we have the most bus service and a lot of our transit service. And as you point out, when you put folks in affordable housing near transit, they're more likely to ride. But we just don't have enough money on the table for affordable housing. It just honestly doesn't pencil out. If you're a developer, for profit or nonprofit, you look at it, you're like, well, cost of land in Los Angeles, I have to build it to a luxury audience because I just can't have it work out. But if we put public dollars with Measure A on the table, it means that we can finance more public and affordable housing. And that means that that's just going to get built near our transit stations and means we're going to need less cars. We're going to need less parking. We're going to need less all of these things that we have currently because more people are just going to opt to use public transportation because it's just more convenient for them. It's faster and it gets them to where they need to go.
Now, you mentioned the fact that we're losing a lot of lower income folks who are being replaced by higher income folks.
Yeah, you fought this.
One of the
What was
reasons,
that?
of course, is because we have a state mandated weak rent control.
Mhm.
And Move LA, I think, has recently joined the number of organizations supporting Prop 33 to combat this. Can you tell us about Prop 33, why it's important, and why Move LA, which is a more transit-oriented organization, is
Yeah.
supporting it?
Well, again, I mean, Prop 33 will repeal what's known as the Costa-Hawkins law, which addresses vacancy decontrol, which is when somebody is forced, for instance, or leaves an apartment, then the owner, can decide to put that apartment on the market for what is market rate, right? And that can double, triple, quadruple that rent. And all of a sudden, that incentive to push somebody out through illegal means or just by making their life a living hell. And we see this all the time is, tenants are just forced out because, their toilet never gets fixed or their water, never gets fixed. They never have hot water because they want to force them out. And so by removing that incentive and by giving back local control to cities and counties to be able to determine what it looks like when an apartment becomes vacant and how much more that property can go up in rent, we think that that is a smart solution to not only keep people housed, which is going to help us get out of this homelessness crisis. Because it's not just, okay, how do we get somebody off the street? It is how do we prevent people from coming on the street in the first place? that is much less expensive than addressing somebody who's already on the street. But it also, by reducing that flow, we're able to address the street homelessness challenge. So we think Prop 33 can help with that. We think it with Measure A, with Prop 5, we believe these will all work together to make housing, ensure that we have more affordable housing and can build more affordable housing far into the future.
Yeah, and I was on the West Hollywood City Council when Costa-Hawkins passed.
Yeah.
And before Costa-Hawkins, somebody might be paying $700 for a unit. And when they moved out, we actually had a more moderate of the strong rent controls. You could increase the rent by 10% if you use the money to maintain your building. Others just kept it at the same level. So you kept a unit affordable. As soon as Costa-Hawkins passed, someone might move out that was paying $700. The next person would be paying $3,000. And every time that happened, that was one more unit that became unaffordable.
Yep.
Literally the reason why rent in Los Angeles is not affordable. LA didn't have decontrol, recontrol at the it did have that at the time. But at some point with rent skyrocketing, they would have changed it. They would have had to, and we would have many more units that are at least somewhat affordable. This would allow rents to be maintained at their already too high level, but not skyrocket any further.
Well, let's be honest.
Pretty reasonable.
I think it's reasonable too. And we have to be honest, the policy so far has failed. We saw this when I was the president of Palms, right? A developer would come in and there would be 5 units of existing affordable housing at a 1-story building. And they say, okay, with these incentives, we're going to build 25 units and 3 of them are going to be affordable. So that meant that we lost 2 affordable housing units. Well, that happened on scale in Palms over and over again, and we just kept losing these affordable housing units. And that was because of Costa-Hawkins. That was because we don't have enough affordable housing money. So I think what we have on this ballot is the most significant change that we are going to make as a state and as a county in terms of affordability on housing. And I think it really starts to shift that big ship of affordability in the region. And I really hope that voters say yes on 33, yes on 5, yes on A.
And we've never really had a serious effort to change it. And it's difficult because landlord associations spend so much money, and they're spending, I believe, an estimated $200 million against Prop 33. But with all these small buildings getting demolished and their tenants evicted, I believe it was, I'm probably a little short on the statistic, 25,000 people that have been evicted and had their housing replaced with luxury units. So and many of those people, if they were low income, they become homeless or they have to leave LA, because if you're in a $700 unit and you get kicked out, you have no options. Nobody else is renting for $700 anymore.
Well, the incentives are so insane because of Costa-Hawkins and other bills that they are building all of these luxury apartments that they're then leaving vacant because nobody will rent them. But as soon as you build an affordable housing unit, guarantee you that unit is going out to somebody who needs it because, the rent is just too damn high.
I know Move LA is also supporting Prop 4, and it authorizes funds for things like wildfire prevention and safe drinking water. Can you tell us a little bit more about that one?
Yeah, it does. I don't know all the specifics for it, but it does help with water projects. There's also some funding in there for clean wind project. We're going to do an offshore wind project out of the Port of Long Beach. That's incredible, all union labor, and will really shift the way that we get power in the state. It will also protect some of our wildlands, including some of our conservancies. So there's some money in there for that. The thing that really gets me passionate and Move LA passionate about Prop 4 is extreme heat. We are going to see double and triple the amount of extreme heat days in our region in places that are already way too hot, like the San Fernando Valley. And heat is a really vicious, vicious thing that can happen to a body. If your body overheats and you do not get medical attention, there's very little that can be done medically to cool you down. And the impact on a body from heat is extreme. It's really awful. Your organs literally start to shut down, can't think straight. And so we've been really big supporters of adding more bus shelters to our system, not just for bus riders, but for the mother who's walking down the street with their stroller and needs a cool spot, or the older adult who's getting some groceries or a cup of coffee and needs a break. We need more trees and more shade and shelter because the extreme heat issue is going to become more and more of an issue as our climate continues to heat up from climate change issues. So that's where Prop 4, this climate bond, we believe we're really leaning into because of that heat aspect and what we can do with that. And we encourage folks to vote yes on that one as well.
Yeah, this is a serious enough problem that the Climate Emergency Mobilization Office in LA, which I helped create,
Yeah.
as a chief heat officer,
Yeah, Marta, my good
operating out of
friend.
that to lead the effort to deal with heat, because we don't want to have hundreds of people dropping dead on the street because we can't handle the fact that we have 125-degree days in LA, which will be happening with some frequency in the future.
We've been, and thank you, by the way, Paul. I don't think you get enough credit for starting that, by the way, and really focusing on that issue. You know, we've been working a lot on the idea of a zero or no car Olympics as we approach the 2028 Olympics. And we have this idea called the Festival Trail. It's one of our big initiatives at Move LA. That would be a 22-mile, zero emission walk, bike, and roll alignment that gets you across Los Angeles, all the way from LAX through South LA, downtown, and all the way into the San Fernando Valley without having to have a car. And we would put community hubs along the way. It's a really inspiring idea. But one of the things we've been talking about, particularly with the climate emergency office, is the idea of, zero deaths during the Olympics. Remember, the Olympics is going to be in July. It's hot. It's August. And we need to make sure that there are no deaths that happen during the Olympics because of extreme heat. And the way to do that is cooling centers, places to cool down, shelter, shade, and less cars, because cars are driving a ton of heat. The more that we are in our cars, the more we're going to have more pollution and more heat trapping gases. And so getting people out of their cars is actually our best strategy. Electric vehicles are great. We love them, but they're only a portion of the solution. Even if we get the electric vehicles on the road that the governor has set us on the path for, in terms of that requirement by 2035 to only be selling electric or zero emission vehicles by 2035, we still need to reduce our vehicle miles traveled by 25% for each and every Californian in the next 7 to 10 years. And so that's going to just mean less car trips for all of us.
And it also means we have to have a more robust transit system as well, of course.
100%. Well, look, Paul, you passed the legislation that put us on this path, sir. Right? To get us on path to achieve our climate goals. And so, we've been doing good stuff as a state, but, it does mean that people are going to have to walk and bike and take public transit more. But what I like to say is we had this whole campaign. I don't know if you remember Meatless Mondays. Do you do Meatless Mondays?
Well, I live with all vegans,
right?
And I would say I'm what they call a reducitarian, trying to transition, but it's a struggle for me.
You're already on your way, but I live in a very similar household as well. But I say we need a Transit Tuesday, because if people can choose one day or one trip a day and say, you know what, I'm not going to take my car, I'm going to walk, bike, or take public transit, that sets us on the path to where we need to get for addressing climate change. And that's not a big lift. I think all Californians are able, or most Californians are able to do that. Now, we still have some work to do in terms of like frequency and reliability and safety of service. And I know we were going to talk about that a little bit, but it's definitely doable and it's definitely needed if we're going to stay on track for our climate goals.
Hey, well, this has been interesting. Let's take another break to hear a few words from our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
Over 11 million Americans are paying more than half of their income in rent. As president, I will take on the high costs that matter most to most Americans. food, clothes, rent. We will take on corporate landlords and cap unfair rent increases.
The age of affordable housing starts now. Vote yes on rent control. Vote yes on Prop 33.
Prop 33 is endorsed by the California Democratic Party. Appearance of Harris did not mean she endorsed the measure. Ad paid for by renters and homeowners for rent control. Yes on 33, sponsored by AIDS Healthcare Foundation. Ad committee's top funders, AIDS Healthcare Foundation and Unite Here Local 11.
And we're back on the Captain's Table radio show and podcast. And we have our guest, Eli Lipmen from Move LA. Eli, what do you think of the state of transit in LA? It seems like ridership is struggling, and part of it has become random violence that sometimes occurs on buses and trains. What are the plans to combat this in the future?
Well, so I wanted to dispel a myth right there. So we just hit 1 million daily riders on the metro system. We are now almost back to pre-pandemic levels. We've had 22 months of ridership growth, which is a record. And Los Angeles now has the second highest ridership in the United States. We beat out Chicago, we beat out DC, we beat out the Bay Area even. So we are seeing a huge ridership, and we attribute a lot of that actually to our fare-free Go Pass program for students. But yes, safety is 100% an issue. And if people do not, both perceived and real, feel safe on the system, they're not going to continue to ride it, or they're not going to switch their modes. And so we see this as like a top priority. There's several components to that. One of it is addressing the crisis on our streets, which is that we had more traffic fatalities, people dying in car crashes, and cyclists and pedestrians getting hit last year than homicides. And we will beat that record this year in 2024. So we need to address that. People need to feel safe walking and biking around their communities, and that's the only way they're going to do more of it. And if they don't, they won't. So we need to address that. We need to slow folks down so that they are not on their phones while driving. That's also a huge crisis. We need to address that, but we also need to ensure that like our transit system is safer. So Metro has an ambassador program. They have a transit watch app program. They have a security system that is a hierarchical system. So you have a lot of these ambassadors who are going to help people get to where they need to go, and are eyes and ears that can see at incidents. But there's also an armed response if needed. You know, we need to see a better coordinated response. We also need to protect operators. So we have these folks, they're incredible. They're my heroes. They operate the buses, but they're the real front lines and are the ones that can de-escalate a situation the quickest. And so we need to protect them. And so Metro is doing a lot to protect them. That incident that happened recently, probably the biggest reason why a lot of lives were actually saved was because that operator had a barrier that didn't allow this person who got on the bus with a weapon to be able to actually get control of the bus because of that barrier. And then I know Metro is putting in some ideas like looking at identifying weapons that shouldn't be on transit as well. So there's definitely like a lot of things. They're also looking at their own transit force, and that's a big change as well. Currently, they contract with LAPD and the sheriff and Long Beach, and they're looking at the idea and exploring having their own police force, and that gives them more control over how they deploy, their different security assets.
And I think that's a great idea. And as I understand it, and I'm not deeply in the weeds on this, Mexico has a pretty strong security force on some of their transit, and they're state owned. They're owned by Mexico, so they put National Guardsmen on their transit or
Well, I
protecting
was
their
actually just
station.
in CDMX in Mexico City, and I rode both the metro system and I rode they have the longest public transit cable car system in the world. And it was incredible. They built that project in 18 months. It's completely ADA accessible. You can put your bike on it, and it costs 7 pesos, which is absolutely nothing. And it's almost 85% is subsidized by fares, which is completely the opposite of what we have. And, I learned so much being there. One thing that I did not notice is a lot of is a lot of security apparatus, to be honest, at all. What worked was the system was very clean and there was a lot of people using it. And honestly, you get a lot of security when there's more people on it. A lot of these incidents that we've seen, these very high profile incidents, are happening at 1 o'clock in the morning. Bet you bottoms to dollars, not a lot of positive things are happening at 1 o'clock in the morning. And the people that are being impacted, honestly, and sadly, are the people who are coming home from a shift, working at a restaurant, who really just want to get home and are caught in the crosshairs of somebody who is having a mental breakdown or has a weapon or has had too much of a substance. And so that's where we're seeing most of these challenges. That doesn't mean that incidents don't happen during the day, but what I found in Mexico is like you have a lot of visibility of personnel, you have a lot of people taking the system, and you have a very clean system. And I was really impressed by what I saw in Mexico City recently.
And it seems like at least a decent number of our crimes are committed by mentally ill homeless or mentally ill who are not homeless, but most of them seem to be. Is there a better way to keep them out of our train stations?
Yeah, housing. I mean, honestly, they wouldn't be on our trains if we had more housing available for them and we had more mental health services. So I say, that's part of what the argument is for Measure A is some of that money will be available for Metro to have more folks. This is an old statistic, but there were about 1,000 people right out of the pandemic who were living on the transit system that Metro knew were living on the transit system. There's nowhere for them to go. And so if we have more places for them to go with more health services and more housing, then we solve some of the major issues with safety on transit systems.
Right, but you've got a 5 or 10 or 15-year plan to resolve that, but we need a 2-month plan to get our transit system back safely. I mean, we shouldn't be allowing people to live in our transit stations. We shouldn't be allowing them to get free access without having a card or something.
No, I agree 100%. And I know we have to wrap up, but what I would say on this is that, Metro is doing a lot to think about some of these more problematic stations and implementing some ideas that they've learned, honestly, from some other places. They've been putting some music in some stations. They've been, closing one of the entrances and having only sort of one point of entry or re-entry. And they've also been doing some projects. And I don't want to speak for the agency because I don't work for Metro. We're just an advocacy organization. But they've been looking at a lot of different interventions that are non-lethal, that do not require, an armed personnel to ensure that, that the system is safe. Look, it's a huge, huge system. We have one of the largest bus systems in the entire country. It's hard to be everywhere at all times. But and you're right, it needs to be safe now. But I'm seeing just in the last couple of weeks, kind of a real shift in that. And I here's my pitch to anyone, Paul, and I'll start with you. Let's go take the bus together. I took it with your former colleagues, Catherine Barger. I just took it. Janice Hahn has been writing this system. I've been taking members of Congress on the system. So, Paul, I'm inviting you right now to take the bus with me. Let's do it.
Sounds good to me. I'm happy to spend a few hours
okay.
Going on
Next
a few
time
different
we'll do the
routes.
captain's table on the bus.
Sounds good. Well, thank you. That's all the time we have on this week's edition of the Captain's Table radio show and podcast. Eli Lipmen, Executive Director of Move LA, thank you for joining us and enlightening us on Prop 5 and a number of other subjects. We appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you. And listen to our show next week at the same time when our guest will be Lynn Bajan, a prominent local singer who will talk about her background in the music industry. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.